Alright, I'm going to respond to what you wrote in the description box on the side, mainly because I read faster than most people speak. I'm going to start out with your syllogism that every law has a lawgiver. There is a moral law, therefore there is a moral lawgiver. This is not necessarily true. The laws of physics, for example, do not inherently need a lawgiver. Even if one restricts the law to what pertains to human actions, there need not necessarily be a lawgiver. Human empathy and an objective effort to reduce suffering is enough. If everyone behaved in a manner intended to reduce suffering and promote empathy, a moral law has been derived. There's no inherent need for religion to gain a moral law as far as objective morality goes. Continuing what you state, if the first and second premises are true, then the conclusion follows. If there are moral obligations, there must be someone to be obligated to. No. I suppose you could classify oneself or mankind in general as someone to be accountable to, but this is contrary to the implication of your statement, which is that there's this magical sky being who has written a moral law that we have to follow. And that's not the case. If we objectively look at the situation and do what's going to reduce suffering, cause the least amount of suffering, not go around harming other people, and basically treat people how we want to be treated, then there's no inherent need for a person to be accountable to for us to follow those principles. You state, whoever said that we should help people is helping people a universal moral obligation, or is it just true for you and not me? That statement is actually a false dichotomy. It doesn't need to be a universal moral obligation, and it doesn't necessarily need to be true for one of us. In fact, there's no moral law that requires us to help people. Helping people is not a moral obligation for either one of us. But it sure feels good, doesn't it? You said, whoever said that Hitler was wrong or right, where did these moral standards come from? As I stated before, what causes suffering? Hitler caused mountains of suffering, and this is objectively wrong, without the need to inject a supernatural being. You state the evidence is not scientific, but moral in nature. Because we know what's absolutely wrong, there must be an absolute standard of rightness. Without this objective standard, any objection to evil is nothing but your personal opinion. Without an objective standard of meaning or morality, then life is meaningless, and there is nothing absolutely right or wrong. Well, firstly, absolute and objective are not the same thing, and you interchange the two quite a bit throughout your little write-up. I'm going to go ahead and respond with how I wrote it down. I noted this up so that I could condense the video. Firstly, science deals with objective truth, so science can tell you why something is either right or wrong. That being said, it's a bit unsatisfactory to not deal with the deeper psychological issues involved in morality. Fortunately, these are still satisfied by objectively asking the questions that I stated before. Does it cause suffering? Does it make people feel good? Does it benefit society as a whole? Or are you just benefiting yourself at the expense of others? Those are questions that you need to ask yourself, and there's no need for a supernatural being for you to be able to ask those and for you to be able to satisfactorily answer them. Secondly, absolute morality is not only not required, it's actually undesirable. If it's absolutely wrong to kill people, then that includes cases of self-defense. The moment morality incorporates mitigating circumstances, then it's no longer absolute. And that's that. Either morality takes situations into account or it doesn't. If it doesn't, it's absolute. If it does, then it's not absolute. Since taking situations into account is what we consider to be justice to begin with, then we as a people have already rejected absolute morality from the get-go. You state, an absolute moral obligation is something that is binding on all people at all times, in all places, and an absolute moral law implies an absolute moral lawgiver. Other than implying your supernatural being, I completely agree. Absolute morality is binding on all people at all times, but neither does it address circumstances. Therefore, it is immoral to maintain absolute morality. Moreover, since objective morality is based upon suffering, it requires no entity to decide what is objectively moral. It simply requires an individual to exercise some forethought with the intent to prevent suffering. Again, if you state that that makes the person the moral lawgiver, then you're going against the implication of your statement. I have no problem stating that there is a moral lawgiver, and that is us as people. That doesn't bother me at all. So long as we adhere to the definitions that we've already given of good and bad. Now, if you think that something that's objectively defined as bad is moral, then you're what everybody else considers immoral. I don't have a problem with that at all, but you're trying to state that you need the supernatural being to fill this gap when in actuality you don't. You state to claim to have the truth, that no one has truth, is self-defeating, so truth must exist. I have to wonder, are you defining truth in a philosophical sense? If so, then no one does have truth. Philosophy is unverifiable, so anybody who states this is the truth philosophically is simply stating this is what I believe. That's it. If you're defining truth as fact, however, then only truths that can be verified objectively are truth. Religious truth are of the philosophical kind. Facts, such as every action has an equal and opposite reaction, is a truth that's objectively verifiable, and therefore I can say that that is the truth. But then again, I would never say that no one has the truth, because, quite frankly, Newton figured it out once upon a time. He had the truth, and he gave it to us. But again, if you're going to the philosophical kind of truth, it's worthless and meaningless. You state to believe in moral relativism is to believe that there are no real moral differences between Mother Teresa and Hitler. That's Godwin's law at work for you. Freedom and slavery, equality and racism are love and hate. So moral relativism must be false. If moral relativism is false, then an objective moral law exists. Yeah, objective morality does exist. But your absolute morality given down by a supernatural being does not. And it's not objective. It's actually subjective to the whims of the supernatural being. But I'm not going to talk about that right now. But basically, in the end, your entire blurb here is a meaningless statement of fact. You also state if there's no moral law, then no position of any moral issue is objectively right or wrong, including the positions taken by atheists. So by rebelling against the moral law, atheists have undermined their grounds for rebelling against anything. That's a self-defeating argument, because atheists don't rebel against objective morality. They rebel against your subjective morality that's based on the whims of your book. Well, your God, but it's all written down in your book. And a lot of what's written down in your book is moral is stuff that we consider immoral. Even Christians today consider slavery immoral, and yet the Bible tells you when it's okay to beat your slave, what's a fair price to purchase a slave with, etc., etc. It's a theistic strawman argument to claim that atheists rebel against morality. Really what they're rebelling against is your book. Atheists not only embrace objective morality, they stick to it, unlike your God, who requires us to forgive unconditionally, but refuses to forgive without bloodshed. The God who claims murder to be wrong, but murders thousands of people throughout the Bible. And you finally state it with, I'm not Catholic, which to me is completely meaningless. I don't understand what you being Catholic has to do with anything, but whatever. One way or another, I've addressed every single one of your points from a perfectly logical point of view, and none of them require a supernatural entity to be invoked in order to gain the benefit from them. So that's that.